So in this video, we're going to be talking about two very important elements or properties that can be used to justify and align flex items inside of a container. So we're going to be talking about two main properties. One of them is going to be responsible for the horizontal alignment and the other for the vertical alignment. So let's talk about them. The first one, which is for horizontal alignment, is called justified content. Now, both of these properties actually contain three main values, which are shared between the two of them, and then each of them contain two special values, which actually align them in a pretty different way than you would expect. So let's talk about justified content. Now, first of all, you'll notice that these are a little bit stretched out. Don't worry about that for now. That's just because of the added height to the container. We'll talk about that in just a second. But let's get started. So the first three properties that are pretty common are flex start, flex end, and center. So flex start is going to be where the container starts, which in this case is on the left. On the other hand, the end is going to be the opposite. So in this container, it's on the right, and then center positions it in the middle. So what I'm going to do here is just set it as center for now. You can see that now all of our items have been centered in the middle here. If I set it to something like flex end, and remember it does contain a dash in there, it's going to move everything to the end of the container here. So those are the three main values. Let's talk about the two special ones now. Now, pretty much these ones are going to be messing a little bit with the spacing between these, but they are still related to alignment because it's changing the spacing in a way that does actually align our elements here. So the two main values are space around and space between. So let's talk about space between first. What happens is that the spacing between the flex items is created so that it's all equal and it creates equal divisions to move everything equally divided from each other on the same row. On the other hand, space around actually creates spacing on all sides of the item. So instead of just creating from each other on the same row. On the other hand, space around actually creates spacing on all sides of the item. So instead of just creating them between, it's going to create them between some of the flex items and the edges. So that's the main difference between the two, and it depends on what you really want. So for example, if you want a centered kind of item or a centered flex box, what you would do is use the space around property, whereas if you wanted something to be stretched out, you would use the space between property. So there we go. Those are some of the little items or values that you can use under justified content property. Now let's move on to align items. So this is the property that aligns it vertically. Now by default it's set to stretch, which is what we can see here. So it just stretches all the way across down to the bottom of the container, but we can actually change this. So let's go ahead and add this property, align items. Now what we're going to do is change it to center. So just like before, we have three main values: flex start, flex end, and center. You can see that immediately now all of these items are still spaced in between, but they have been moved to the center here. So you can see here that on the align items, this has been arranged vertically. This is the start at the top, and the bottom, or the flex end, is at the bottom of the container. Justified content says that flex start is on the left side and the flex end is on the right. So there we go. You can see what this looks like right here is when we align the items, it centers it in between the top and the bottom. So let's go ahead and just see what the other values look like. So for example, flex start. So let's just say you want to keep the height of these items the same, you don't want to stretch them, this is what you would do. You'd also set it to flex end if you wanted something to appear at the end of the page. And yeah, that's pretty much it for those three main values. Now let's talk about the two special values. So these are a little bit different because they don't follow some general convention. The two values are baseline and stretch. Now we've already covered stretch a little bit in the beginning of this, in which we could set stretch as our default value, and all that does is just align it all the way through from top to bottom. But baseline is a little bit different. Now unfortunately we can't really see that right here. Pretty much what happens is that all of these items, no matter their size, are aligned to a baseline. Now, if I actually go and add some inline styles, the effect apparent, but baseline is a little bit different. Now, unfortunately, we can't really see the effect apparent right here. Pretty much what happens is that all of these items, no matter their size, are aligned to a baseline. Now, if I actually go and add some inline styles to override some of these, so for example, B, I'm going to, let's just say I'm going to make the line height, which is a property we haven't actually learned yet. What we're going to do is just set the align height to, no problem there. I'm going to set this to 100 pixels, like that. And now what I'm going to do is go ahead and refresh the page and see what happens. You can see that this is a little bit higher, but they're all aligned on the same line. You can see that the fonts here have been changed a little bit, it's not really apparent here, but you can see the heights are different, but they're still all in the same line. So that's what baseline actually does. It just, no matter the size or the font text or anything, it's all going to keep them, or it's going to keep them all on the same baseline, and that's what it does. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and remove this inline style since we don't need it. And those are pretty much the two main alignment properties. Now, if you wanted to align something to the center of a flex box, what you would do is just set justify content and align items, both of them to the center. And what that's going to do is just align everything to the center of the flex box. So that's what I've just done here, is I set both of them to center. So that way, on the top, it's centered between the top and the bottom, as well as the left and the right. All right, let's move on. So for the first part of this section, we've been talking about a lot of the properties that we can use for the actual flex container. So you can see that we've covered 5 here: the display type, which is to create the container, the direction, wrap, and our content alignment properties. We haven't actually talked anything about the items themselves because we've just been looking at the container. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next few videos, is looking at some of the properties that we can use on our items themselves to change how they look. And that's when the real power of Flexbox comes in and really shows how it can be used. So the first item that we're going to be covering, or property in this case, is flex item order. Now, instead of adding this directly to the container, we can actually go through and add this to the flex items themselves. So I'm going to hold Control or Command if you're on Mac, and go ahead and add our style property to all 5 of these flex items, because what we're going to actually have to do is add this property to all of our items. So it seems like a new line was created there. Let's get started. So pretty much what we're going to be doing is using a property to change the positioning, or order in this case, of our flex items. So I'm going to go ahead and create that multiple cursor feature again, and the property we're going to use is order. Now, what we can do is go ahead and start specifying our order. So pretty much what we're going to do is go through and change what this looks like and how this looks like in our place here. So what we're going to do is go and specify our values, and then instead of having it from A to E, we're actually going to go through and add something to make these properties look in a different way, instead of having to actually move all of these around. So instead of moving the divs around and changing all of them, we're actually going to go through and specify some numbers. So let's get started. So what we're going to use for this is numbers. Now, this ranges from 1 all the way up to as many numbers or as many items as you have. And the default value is 0, and this is just going to keep it in its position. But we can actually specify the number to see where it lands. So let's just say that I want D first. What I'm going to do is go ahead and under my order property, add a 1, just like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and add E. So I'm going to set my order to 2. Now, if you've worked with computers before, you might think that it starts with 0, but in this case, 0 is our default value, so we're not actually going to be using that. So I have D, then E. Now let's say I want B next, so I'm going to put it under the 3rd position. Now for C, or actually A, I'm going to put it as the 4th position, and C is the last. So let's see if this holds up here. Refresh the page, D, E, B, A, C. So you can see that we can actually change the order of these flex items directly from our CSS instead of having to go through and move them around. Now you might be wondering why this could be useful at all. Now, although it might not be apparent here because we haven't actually we're using JavaScript, once you start making your website interactive, this becomes a very useful feature because you can't just go through and program something to move the divs around in your HTML document without using some sort of file reading. Instead, it's much easier to just add a style to it where you can change the order, maybe even randomly. So you can see how this would work. And although, like I said, although it may not be useful in this case, it will definitely be useful once you start learning about JavaScript and start making your websites interactive. So that's a little bit about flex order. Now, just one thing, you don't actually have to use it with an inline style tag, but it would be much easier considering that if without it, you'd have to go and add an individual class to every single item. Now, of course, it's much easier to just go ahead and add a style tag to each of these, but if you want to use it with a class method, maybe you already have an existing class, you can go ahead and do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just using this because it's a lot more convenient and easy to use. Alright, so that's pretty much it about flex order. It's quite easy to learn once you know how to find the positions of items and how you know how to order them in the right way.
Hold on.
As long as you know the number of items you have, it's very easy to position them just the way you like. Alright, let's move on.
Talking thing doesn't work, bro. I'm telling you.
Basis. Now, although it might not seem like it, these actually are completely responsible for the responsive power of Flexbox, and it's what really makes it what it is today and why it's used so commonly over things like floats and display types. So first of all, if we look at it now, it might seem that flex, grow, and shrink just specify the width and height, and although they sort of do, they are very different when it comes to the core concept and how it's decided. So the first thing we need to do is talk about the flex basis property because from there we're going to define everything else. Now, we all know that we have 5 items here and they take up a certain amount of space each. But you can see that there's all of this extra room
Then the
here
order
on
this.
the
What are you doing,
side.
bro?
So what actually happens is these properties work to define how the extra space or
nonsense
this
inside of that
remaining
nonsense.
excess
There's a
space
whole lot of
is
nonsense
divided
already
up
on this
between
page.
them. And
I
from
don't
there,
want
we
any
can
more
actually
nonsense
specify
adding on.
width
This is some weird
based on
contraption. Look
the,
at this
browser
nonsense.
width, and it's all
It's
responsive,
so
so
long.
it's all
It's really hard
decided
to look at. It's really
completely
hard
based
to
on the
see.
browser and
Can't
on
even.
the properties that you define. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and actually add this property to all of them, and I'm going to explain why in just a second and why we need to do that. So what I'm going to do is first of all, I'm going to go ahead and add the flex grow property and the flex shrink property. Now we're not going to use all of these in one go, we're just going to do this gradually. And then our flex basis. Okay, so let's talk about flex basis first. What this does is it pretty much defines the minimum width of an item or a flex item. So this can be any value. It doesn't have to be a specific number or unit. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and set this as maybe 100 pixels for each one as its minimum width. We go ahead and refresh the page, and now you can see it's a lot wider. But you can see that there's still this extra space. So this is where our flex grow property comes in. Now what happens is if I actually go ahead and go to all of them and set them all as 1, what this is pretty much going to say is every flex item is going to get the same amount of extra space. So you can see that this gets, if all of them are 1, they all get the same amount. Let's go ahead and see that when we refresh the page. You can see now there's only a little bit of margin, which is normal, but all of them are divided up equally now that we've set them as 1. But what happens if we go ahead and actually change this value? Let's go ahead and, for example, set our 5th item as 2, maybe. So now you can see that although it's not much bigger, it is a little bit bigger. So what this is pretty, let me go ahead and set it to actually something a little bit bigger so it's more obvious. So you can see now this is a lot bigger than the other items. So pretty much what this is saying is our 5th item, this container item,
Flex
is
grow.
going
Let's
to
do
get
it,
5
bro.
times as much excess space as the rest of the items here. So one thing you need to know about flex grow is that you need to add this property to every single one of them and make sure that they have a defined value. If you want them just to give them a default space, give them a value of 1. And this is because what happens is when you don't give them any value, if you give this flex grow property to anything, it's going to eat up all that extra space. Let's go ahead and demonstrate this now. I'm going to go ahead and erase all of these flex grow properties just temporarily, and then I'm going to leave it on this one. Now I'm going to set it to 1. Now you might expect this is to be just a little bit bigger, but let's see what actually happens. If we go ahead and refresh the page, you can see that this is actually bigger than when we set this to this flex grow property to 5. So what's going on here? Pretty much what's happening is the default value for our flex grow property is actually 0, which means it's going to remain the same width and it's not going to take up any excess space. So pretty much what's happening is when we set this to 1, everything else is not taking any excess space, leaving it all to that 1 value. So all of that extra space is taken up by this block here. And you can see that, and it's proven because there is still no excess space here since it's all taken up by this property. So what I would recommend is before we learn the flex property in the next video, just go ahead and add this flex grow property to every single item or container if you plan to use it. So now if we go ahead and refresh the page, you can see that that's working great. Now what's the advantage of using this? Before we move on to our next property, if I actually resize this window right here, I'm just going to resize it, you can see that when it grows, it still takes up the same proportions of excess space. Now we'll talk about getting smaller in just a little bit, but you can see here that it does actually take up the same proportion, and that's where the really responsive power of Flexbox comes in. It's getting smaller in just a little bit, but you can see here that it does actually take up the same proportion, and that's where the really responsive power of Flexbox comes in. Is when you're resizing your windows and browsers and there's all of the different devices, this actually stays the same. So let's move on to our next property now, flex shrink. So we know that the basis or the minimum width is 100 pixels. That's the minimum it can go. But when we actually shrink this down and all of these get smaller, I'm actually going to go ahead and remove the flex wrap property from here because it's a little bit intrusive here. And although it's not good for this example, we'll go ahead and use it later. So when we go ahead and actually shrink this window, you can see that that proportion is actually lost. So what's going on here? Pretty much when you go below the minimum width, whether it's defined on our flex basis or the minimum width of the container item itself, what's happening is that proportion is completely removed and you go to the default value of flex shrink. So flex shrink is similar to flex grow, except what happens is it defines the rate of shrinkage of each container item, again, relative to the rest of the items. So in this case, what we have to do is go ahead and look at how this shrink property works. Default value for this, unlike flex grow, is 1, not 0. So what this is saying is shrink each item at the same rate as all the other items. And that's why we can see that once we go under the minimum width, you can see that all of those items begin to look the same. So what I'm going to do here is actually go ahead and show you how to manipulate this. And this is where the real responsive power comes in and where you can really change how everything looks on different devices. All we have to do is go ahead and specify the value that we want here. And one thing to note is that if you don't want something to shrink, you can just set the value to 0. So for example, if I wanted to remove the shrinkage of our fourth item here, or let me go with our first item. Right here, all I have to do is go ahead and set our shrink value to 0. And what this is going to say is don't shrink the item. Even if it goes below, do not shrink the item at all, let everything else shrink. Let's go ahead and see how this looks on our site. So we're going ahead, we're removing that space, but you can see that our first value does not shrink at all. So there we go. Now let's go ahead and start adding our shrinkage values to the rest of our items here. So what I'm going to do is first add a value of 1 to all of them, just like this, just to keep everything the same. And now what we're going to do is go ahead and start manipulating them. So first of all, let's go ahead and say that we want our middle value to shrink 3 times as fast. So we're going to go over to our middle value and change the flex shrink to 3 times. So now we go ahead and refresh the page, and when we shrink it, you can see that that value shrinks 3 times as fast as everything else. So you can see that, and it's pretty apparent there. So there we go. That's pretty much it for our 3 values. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is if your flex shrink is 1 and it's not there on purpose, you can actually go ahead and remove it since the default value is 1. I forgot to mention that in the when I started changing them. But there we go. Now what I'm going to say is, why would you use something like this, flex grow and flex shrink? When you're laying out entire pages based on Flexbox, you want to make it as responsive as possible. You don't want to go and, have it look completely different on one device to the other. What you can actually do is use this to change the look of a website depending on what device you're on. So, for example, you can use this property to change the look of a website on a mobile phone versus on a widescreen TV. It's going to be completely different, and you can do this using only a few properties instead of having to go and define entire styles for separate devices. So from here, we can actually really see the true power of Flexbox. From here, we can go ahead and actually model our website with just a few styles that are very streamlined and efficient to change the look of a website completely on different devices.
So stinky, bro.
So I hope that
You
was
really are.
easy to understand. Now I
The
know
box
it's quite
thing
hard
is
to wrap your
trying
head
to
around,
totally
but
mess
this
it
is
up.
the
Looks
core
terrible.
concept of Flexbox, and it's what really makes Flexbox what it is. So if you understand this, the rest of Flexbox and using it is going to be a breeze. All right, let's move on.
Thank you, bro. Get to this joint, man.
So
We
in this
gotta
video,
do
we're
this
going to be
flex
moving
stuff.
on from flex,
Flex,
grow, shrink,
baby.
and basis, and actually talking about a really useful shorthand property that can summarize all 3 of these into an even more streamlined method. So in the past video, I talked just briefly about the flex property, and pretty much what it is a shorthand to use the flex grow, shrink, and basis property in one go. So we can use this to our great advantage, because instead of adding all of these properties to every single one of these items, we can actually just summarize it down into one simple property. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Pretty much the flex property, which is the property that we're going to be using, follows or takes in 3 values: the grow, the shrink, and the basis. So what we're going to do is first add our grow. In this case, it's 1. And then we're going to add our shrink, which is the default value of 1. And that's just a little tip. If you don't actually have it defined, just go ahead and set it as the default value. So just a quick summary: grow, the default is 0, which means it's not growable. The default shrink value is 1, which means shrink it at the rate of everyone else. And then there is no default for the basis property unless you use something like auto. So what you can do is go ahead and define that as 100 pixels. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and do it for the rest of these items. Flex, just the property. Here we're going to go 1,
We're
which is
doing
the
flex
grow,
for what the heck?
3, which is the shrink, and again,
Oh,
100
never mind.
pixels for the basis.
That's way easier. What the heck?
That I'm getting into here. 5 for the grow, 1 for the shrink, which is the default, and 100 pixels for our basis. Let's go ahead and do it for this one. And like I said, you can see the rhythm here, and you can just go ahead and do this very quickly without having to manually go through and add all 3 of these properties. 1, 1, and 100 pixels. Alright, now let's go ahead and erase all of these other unnecessary properties now that we have our flex property. That, and erase that. So if we did this right, pretty much what's going to happen is everything is going to look the same. Since all of our values are still working, we just threw them into a shorthand. Let's go ahead and first, before we refresh, check out the behavior. Oh, whoops. Something's going wrong there. Yeah, there we go. So let's just check out the behavior. We shrink, B gets smaller, D doesn't shrink at all. And when we size up, our last value gets bigger. Let's go ahead and refresh the page and see if this worked. So when we shrink, D is supposed to stay the same and B gets smaller. There we go. So D stays the same and B gets smaller. And if we enlarge it, you can see
You
that
can tell me any of this nonsense before.
So there we go.
I don't want to do
See how
reshape
all of this works.
phase
Instead of
box
adding three
nonsense.
properties, we can actually just go ahead and do this in one straight swoop. Just go through and add all three values using one property, the flex property.
It must be trapped.
Let's move on.
Like easing up in there.
So this is going to be the last video on Flexbox, and I'm sure that we've summarized all of the different things that you can do with Flexbox in this section, and then you
That's
can
why it
go off
doesn't do
and
that,
start
because
using
not
it
on the right
and
one.
creating all sorts of really cool responsive websites and layouts with it. But for now, what we're going to be doing is going through and learning the final property. Now, we've learned how to align all of the elements at the same time in our Flex container. We learned how to align it both vertically and horizontally. But what we're actually going to be doing is learning how to align each item. And remember, because each item is laid out widthwise in a certain way, we can only align it vertically. So just keep that in mind for now. So let's get started. Now, in order to align it vertically, we use the align items property to work with and align all of these. So in this case, what we did with our container is aligned all of them to the center. But what we're going to be doing now is going through and aligning each individual item using a special property called align self. Now, one thing to note is that this property will override the align items property if you have it enabled. So for example, if I wanted to align this to the top, it would override our center and would align this only this item to the top. So let's get started. First thing I want to do is go ahead and add the property, and remember, we have to go and add it just like everything else. So I'm going to go through and add it now. So first thing I'm going to do is go and let's just take our first item, for example. Where is it? There we go. So now I'm going to go ahead and add align self, and now we can go ahead and add our different values.
Yeah, that song is terrible, bro. We got something messed up on
I'm going to
ours.
go ahead and try something just like with the normal values.
Hold the phone. We messed up something big time here. We gotta fix that link. I'm tired of those links being like that. There's something on those links that's messed up. They're big time. My God. Let's you doing a box, my boy. Come on. Not a box. Ooh. Not that kind of box. Border. Jimmy. I like that song. Where did you get those things in there from? What the heck? Where'd you get those?
So in the past, we've learned about some pretty basic layouts. We've learned about floats and display of
Get on with the point, Dexter. You can get time for this. We're in a time schedule here, man.
All right, let's get started. So, well, next container. So all we have to do is go ahead and find our parent element. The container
You did that without us, man. Come on.
Set up here.
Can't be doing stuff without
Go
us.
ahead and do this on your own, you can. Like I said, if you want to copy these styles, for example, you can go ahead and check out the project files. But like I said, you can just go ahead and create your own setup so that you can start working with it. So first of all, we'll be looking at the other page, and by the end of it, we'll
box model.
All right, so that's pretty much it for fonts. Next, we're just to.
I would like to think this is it, but I really am not sure at the moment.
I wanted to everywhere instead of obviously you can put some of the different whole box.
Factor Element's the best, my boy. I can tell you that right now. I can test a bunch of features out on there.
What I'm gonna do is
That's what I'm gonna do.
Let's go ahead and just take this very commonly. So the last thing I'm gonna go ahead and change and we're remembering, which means what's going on. So to work,
I'm
this is
supposed to
called
remember all these trash CSS
to it to actually
looking things, my boy.
because
These things are
but
not cute.
this I
Like having double
all the
lines may
content
look
after
nice for a moment, but they
it,
do not look nice at the end of the day. I remember watching all this, I just don't remember it
this first,
at all.
for example,
And instead, just ends up making it already.
Flexbox works. All right, let's get started. So, well, it's actually quite easy to set up a Flex container. The hard part is creating it how you want. But it uses the display property, just like any other item on this page. So we set the display to block or inline Flex containers on your own. You can create or made block or inline it just in a row.
That's what he did. Never mind. Yeah, we gotta remake this whole thing. Cause he's doing, we're not doing a different thing. So we're gonna have to we're gonna have to rewrite a different thing for it. Oh boy, this is gonna be fun. I got like this one. Let's see here. I guess we can put you in here. Yeah, might as well. If these work, then we're good, you know. I think you put div tags in here. Yeah, we'll put them in here too. We'll have to turn the music on because we're gonna be a minute. This is gonna be it's gonna take a while. It's really it's gonna be a minute. Hip hop, hip hop.
On va danser dans le monde entier sur la musique de
Jimmy Z. No, she didn't.
with the master plan. Interrupt the house like I know he can. When he's on the scene, just call him door. So hurry up and get your ass on the floor. Making all the people just scream and shout. Jimmy, Jimmy, show what it's all
Jimmy, Jimmy. I gotta see what code he had put in there because he messed it up big time. I'm telling you. Why not? That's where that garbage came from. Never mind. Let's put that green, yeah. Let's put that green. Put the RGB junk on there. I'm not gonna put that on. Oh yeah, she's guy makes a lot of things simple. She could. This stuff is crazy, bro. I just can't believe I didn't do this. Oh my god. You put the margin in there. My golly boy, I'm telling you, you're crazy. Check this out. Jimmy, Jimmy, Jimmy. Jimmy, Jimmy, Jimmy. I love that Jimmy song. Yo, that's insane, my boy. Yo, You know what? You're good with that. You know what? That's crazy. Alright, hold on, let me try something. Let me try A here. If this thing can link to other pages, we're done. Jimmy. This whole thing's like a button, bro. Oh my gosh. No way. Yo, I've just figured that out, my boy. That's crazy. That is insane. I love those beats, man. That is insane, my boy. No way. No way. I just. That's insane, my boy. How to. What was it? I'm just mind-boggled by that working on. Look up, yeah, we're gonna be there in a minute. We're just gonna have to really mind. Oh my god, what did you do? Crazy fool. Lost in the world of love, I get from crazy you. Class equals www. I'm so strung out, thinking about the crazy things you do. Crazy. Explain that. It's just gonna hide the thing. What the heck? No. But there's a CSS to do it, man. Don't do that. Oh, snap. No underline helper. I look at how they coded their joint, man. I want to see how they did that. Now my computer's all messing up. Doggone thing don't know what to do. Doggone thing, boy. I'm telling you, that was insane when I figured that out. I was like, look at that again. They put a bunch of the CSS up there, man. You crazy for doing that. That's why they put an on-click thing on there. None of that was that, man. I'm telling you. They put the style display, all that good stuff, right? Then they put ID. Okay. WD button goes target stuff. display. Take that out for a quick second. Put a radius. What's in the ID thing? What the heck does this go to? I don't know. I don't think it's cheating, more of just like seeing what everybody else does, using them, and saying, that's how they do it. This is a class. What kind of class is this? What the heck? Why is it this long? Oh, that's a hover thing. I guess they divided them up into different classes. I'll put them all in one class. And then you put the styling in there, and then you put the hair link far in there. It defaults by itself. Doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it does that. So it doesn't look like they have any. They're using a button though. The heck? Because they use the Java thing for on click. They use a doggone Java mess, man. I'm telling you. Here, and they do on click or whatever. This could be the next big break for our new styling. Because, that will probably work. That could work. We're going to use that. We're going to see what that is. On click. We're not putting any of that on click nonsense because that doesn't look like that. Display. Never going way over time, but it doesn't matter. We get to fix this. We need to see what this would do. But the whole button itself does that. It's actually amazing. That knowing that it does that, that's actually really good. Snap! I didn't put that span in there. That thing destroyed it. What did I do? Oh, I put spam in. That thing destroyed it, man. But no, I forget it. We were, this was actually able to work. And like a way less code, actually. This is crazy how much less code is needed to do that. So we're gonna one time I did that, but we're gonna actually make the border border top top and then 7 and then 7 7. How you justified more than one number. We can try that and see if that works. If it doesn't, I know why, but we can always try it. Didn't save everything. Dang it, now my computer's going dead. Nice. Now it's its home. This is just like the first episode when we had everything. Actually, what if we was to close that tag and put it inside that tag? I don't know if that would work. We can try. Victory, up of the victory. God. We'll do 2 pixels. We don't need to be 70. How about 10 line height? Let's try 20, maybe 15 actually. Yeah, we don't need to be that big. 2 pixels. Solid. Which one is orange? Oh yeah. Oh, X. Okay, we'll just do perfect. Five. We just don't have to justify it, so it automatically resizes. Yikes. That's actually pretty cool. Another victory. Another victory. Line height. Yeah, we can put that in. It's the width. That's the real thing. We can cut it how long and far they go. I mean, we got almost full control. Got a dog. AW. I forgot about border radius. What in the world am I doing? Yeah. Dang it. Make it say daddy out of one nut. Say daddy out of one nut. Make it say out of one nut. I'm sorry for looking at the tutorials, man. I'm trying my hardest here. Yeah, it definitely did something, I can tell. But that's not enough. You need something very much stronger. My golly. See, look at this, my boy. Oh my god. We got the best links now. We gotta get these links ready, man. Links are almost ready. Oh my. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. Every day. cool. Mm, mm, mm. So the on click button is just gonna do it because it's already embedded with the link. If you do the on click, you can remove the link without. So I mean, besides that, I mean, we got this, man. Out of one month. Out of 1 month. Make a say, daddy, out of 1 month. God. What color should we have? We should have a gold. We'll see on here if we see a color that we like, we're gonna reuse it. Make it say, 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 daddy, out of 1 month. It's pretty bad. That actually does look pretty bad. Radius, border line or whatever. What's radius? Never mind. The heck did it do? Dang it, man. How long are you going on for? good. We good, man. We just figured out something great. I've been trying to do something great for a while now. I've been meaning to update that, and now we had to fix that because it messed everything up. It's really been annoying me how bad it's been messed up, and it's like, yo, why? I'm tired of the song, man. I really am. Okay, it does work. There's clear on the 6th, though. Dang, that was, rough. Dang it, I knew that was what I was doing. It was 44. Like that, I'm choking. Yeah, but this is that instead. This is really what I have to do. It's getting weirder and weirder. The whole thing's a link, not just like whatever this is. I don't know why it's lingering on the top like that. But this is like the whole thing's a link. I want that. I really do. I like the 15. I like the 15 better. Okay, we gotta get the charger fast because this thing's gonna mess it up. I don't even know if the charger. We can actually deal with it for a little bit. In black. I'm really liking what we're doing right now, and we can actually fix this up right now. I'll take the hex code. Right then, just take that and I must fix this up, alright? Decepticon. Foot smooth operator. Use to justify content. Start. It's like, you know what, you try to do something nice, it's like, let's make that a bolded one too, because, you know, I like my bold. I love when they're bolded, because it'll smooth up a radar. Because I'm so smooth. Yeah, that's way better. I'm turning that color once it's highlighted, so we're going to turn this to a, the question is, are we going to have two different ones? We're going to move all this to the top there, man. We're turning all this up there. Basically going to be that new thing, so we're just going to put most of the code in there. Like, we don't need any of this stuff. We're referring back and forth between CSS files. It's going to be mostly CSS files in this thing. That's really all this is, essentially. So let me fix that up. What reason? Yeah, test 2 is going to be... Oh, that's why. I'm telling you, bro, this stuff is terrible because I'm going to fix all this. Okay. Tier M1. Delete half of that stuff because we can put that one. Okay, god dog, man, there's so much of this nonsense going on in there. Please tell me. Imagine like going from this to this, man. We're going from two different extremes here. It's really nice. I'm liking it. We're gonna turn that to 35 is good. Just the width that is crazy, man. This stuff is crazy. Then we're gonna have to go for like 60 or something long. Forms. You can do the this, like, you can put that in there. You can put a little bit of extra stuff, but it's gonna be like maybe 3 lines at the most. Like that's way smaller than that. And most of the code is just that. It just links it. All it does is link it to this page right here. That's where most of it is. You probably have to add something else in there that makes it so where it doesn't do that, but base stuff is here, man. I'm telling you. Where's the home page? Oh my god. Egg snap, that's why. Yeah, there we go. Chicks. So this is format. I'm gonna format all this stuff in there. God. So you grab it. Looks like for kids. Man, let's turn on the show because this is gonna take a while. This is gonna take a while. Oh my god, it's gonna take a while. Yeah, this is gonna take a while. Yeah, because we gotta format all that correctly, and it's not even working right now. We gotta fix that. I mean, everything we've learned so far, we've already seen, so we don't have to. I'm not worried about learning new stuff. Everything we've seen. How does let's go way longer. 60, 70. Order radius. The line. Here we go. Highest forms taking up 40% of that. Heck. God dog it. Three. Cut. Down to 4. Disregard deal is off. You tried to kill me. The heck? Yeah, Sugar and Sky, I can think of about a million reasons why you should get moving right now. Why are you grunting so long for? What the heck? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5, right? Log in and then we put that for a second. Put that for 80, actually. Put that for 80. Let's try that. I want to learn more. 3, we can put that for 82. Login page. Learn more. Login page. Yeah, it's doing that now. Okay, I don't know why the login page is right there. Learn more. Login page. That's 5. This is 4 though. So why is that making that one bigger? Hold on, man. Okay, About Us is actually messed up, so we gotta fix that About Us thing. Plugin. Why are you little? Let's put it back at 100 then. God dog, that's crazy. 60, save that, food. Yeah. What is it changing? Okay. Background color. Okay. Margin, background size. Okay, let's take that off actually. Text align. We don't really care about that. We can fix that actually. I do the justified thing, right? Yeah, because this is messing it up big time. You have to come with those justified traits. No way. No way. This thing is tricky. Okay, span. Thank you. Okay, fine, I'm getting somewhere. Thank you. God, dog, man, we are terrible at this thing. Okay, finally we're getting somewhere. Okay, which ones learn more intelligence for skeleton? Probably 100. What you got left in the tank? Let's try 90 then. Now we fixed the problem. God, dog, man, I'm telling you. It's took me way too long. text line. Duh.
Confirming the existence of a zombie virus. What? You're not doing that. Yeah, because the government doesn't own a shredder. Give your head a shake, dude.
That's what.
Goes so instead, you'll be doing Sean's second choice. Choice number 2 is still good. There's the starting line, and there's the finish. You just have to race from one to the other without touching the ground. Jetpacks? Yes! Jetpacks, no. You have to climb and travel from tree to tree.
Jetpacks now.
Finish line, and you have to start all over. The good news is, I didn't add any extra danger to this challenge. That is good news. Because it's already fully stocked. Zombies aren't great at climbing trees, and forget jumping from one tree to another. No way can they do that, which is why I can. Time to shine.
Nice. Okay, he's fine.
Sure, he's good at it. I'll just follow him, then jump ahead at the finish line.
Okay, we gotta copy this one because that one's not censored.
I'm in the finale and she's in the cannon. Ready? Set.
Oh, that's damn. Is that not censored?
Impressive maneuvers from Sean and Sky. Sugar, finish line isn't so much up as it is
Margin.
Hush, Chris. I know what I'm doing. I don't know. We should always take higher ground. Who knows? Maybe there's a bridge up there. First off, if you've never been to the top of a tree, you can't say there ain't. This looks too far to jump. Oh, crud! Ready to lose again?
Nice.
Can't hear you. You're too far behind me.
You're too far behind me. Yeah.
Enjoy your loser sandwich. Hey there, fella.
This is a longer episode. I'm sorry, you guys. This is a bit of a long episode. I gotta be honest with you.
Preparing for zombies, then a monkey with a saw throws all that work out the window.
I gotta be honest, this was a bit of a longer episode, but you know we gotta fix now. Okay, so now.
Counter with monkey with saw hands? Or are we hurtling towards an all-girl finale? Find out after the break. On top. Hey, I'll give you whatever you want. Just don't. Whoa, that was close. Have a nice fall. Just stay put while I go win this. He just sawed away the only branch you could possibly reach. You do know what gymnastics are, right? Oh, man. Hey, Sean! Thanks in advance for the great challenge! Hey, where's Sugar? What a rip!
Dang it.
It's like she doesn't even know. Sounds like Sean don't be the only one who has to start over. Sweet!
That's what they was going over. This is so crazy.
Sugar wins!
Margin.
Second place is still up for grabs. Do I really have to start over? Great stuff.
Great stuff.
Nailed it! And Sean takes second place.
small.
We got a three-way tie. It all comes down to one final challenge. Sugar.
It's a talent show, and we will just break cells. You're gonna get sugar.
2 minutes to prepare.
Who's luck? And you got
Is zombie apocalypse survival a talent? No.
a talent contest? Ugh, the only talent I have is kind of close. What choice do I have?
The talent contest will be judged by me, this intern, assuming the cash is finally back in the case properly. Very good. And our final judge is the newly rebuilt and upgraded Scuba Bear 2.0. Now with 20% more hostility. Dude, perfect timing. We need a new intern. Anywho, like I was saying, finalists will perform in the same order as their challenges. First, Scott, then Sean, then Sugar.
Those are the best for life?
Go time! I hope no one else is gonna sing, because that will be hard to top. There's a new sheriff. Here she is.
Howdy, I'm the new sheriff.
Yes, we already know that.
Right. And, I'm the best belcher you've ever seen. Belching ain't a talent. It's a way of life.
And a peanut gallery.
A belching sheriff will belch in hell.
Why is the text?
It's not that weird. All my Olympic training makes my abs and diaphragm ridiculously strong. When I really load up on carbonated water, I can burp out a campfire.
God, dog, man, that thing messed it up. Can't believe that thing did that.
Thanks, partner.
Wow.
That was terrible.
Let's see the judges' score.
6.5.
Bad guy costumes were cliche. Black hats, yawn. Score 24.5.
The black hat costume was a big cliche. Black hat, yawn.
Guess what? Same to you.
Wasn't that something? John. So I will be performing an armpit serenade. Excuse me? You know, when you perform a classical serenade, armpits? Disgusting.
Continue. Better.
Hard face. Look, armpit, burnt face. Impressive.
Pack your things.
Going to the finale! Woohoo! That's the first time I ever tried that armpit thing. Not in public. Sweet!
I can't lie, I'm worried. Talent shows are Sugar's thing. Probably her only thing, but her thing. I wish Mama were here. Before every pageant, she always gives me the same awesome pep talk. We didn't drive 2 days straight for you to spend all your time playing with the fancy flush toilets. Now get your dress on. This is my thing. You can count on that.
I gotta read all of this.
Read it. It's
She's a genuine come to earth to shame.
us.
To save us from our boring, unclenching lives. Skip the intro.
Fine, never mind. Dear fans, you know me as Sugar, but my farmies on the farm call me
Oh.
Sugar Silo. The only artist to ever combine rap and country. I call it Crabtree.
Wow, I don't know what to say. Oh, wait, yes, I do.
The talking horse with two legs speak. I think I'm Miss Olympic and the dog a freak.
Wow, I don't know what to say. Oh, wait, yes, I do. That was horrible. Final words?
I personally believe competition shouldn't be based on points, but instead on your general awesomeness, which means I should not be in this cannon! Coming Wizard!
Next stop, the super big, awesome, and deadly finale. He's about to become $1 million richer. Will it be Sean or will it be Sky? Find out next time on the season finale of Total Drama Cocktail Island. Previously on Total Drama, Sean, Sugar, and Sky created their own challenges. Sky came up with hurdles. Sean jumped them. Sugar collected them. Sean's treetop race was more entertaining than a sawing monkey. Not only did Sugar win, she had long doing it. So, it all came down to Sugar's challenge. A talent show. Sheriff Sky felt plastic comments to bits. We were all moved by Sean's armpit opera. And when Sugar combined rap and country music, well, it was something I will never forget. See ya! Down to 2 from 3, because now we're sugar free. But it'll still be sweet to see who gets beat. So, grab a seat. There's $1 million on the line. It's finale time on Total Drama Cocktail Island.
Thanks. If it gets smaller and smaller over here.
Sleep! Come on, sleep! What is going on? I've never had trouble sleeping before a big competition. The only difference this time is I could win $1 million. Yeah, it's probably the money. I bet Sean's having the same problem.
It's out like a light, by the way. So yeah, we're gonna finish up this tomorrow. We already went way past our time here. Already hitting 2 hours. Yeah, check it out. Yeah, we've gotten what we needed to get. I think we know. I know why. That's the good thing. The good news is we can go back and fix it. The bad news is it's not fixed. But yeah, I think we know what's going on. We just gotta fix it now. So it's great. Let's do it. See you guys in the next video.